If you have an unquenchable thirst to crush your bucket list, relentlessly pursue your dreams, and live life on your own terms, then turn up the volume and tune in. You're now listening to Zeph and Moses Blacksburg on the Year of Purpose podcast.
Zeph and Blacksburg here with another episode of the Year of Purpose, and I've got James here, and James is an avid outdoorsman and entrepreneur with a passion for learning. He spent his college years in Charleston, South Carolina, and then moved out west to pursue his passions in the mountains of Wyoming and Colorado. James returned to the Northeast in 2014 to start GuideHire, with his co-founder, Macgill Davis. What's going on, James?
Hey, Zephin. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. I'm excited to have you here today because, we're fairly similar in age, and so to hear from somebody else who's, starting a business, getting stuff off the ground, it should be pretty fun. So maybe let's start at the beginning. How did you go from college to having a company?
Yeah, sure. So it's definitely, I didn't leave college saying, all right, I want to own my own company. I've always known that eventually I was going to work for myself, but I didn't know how that was going to manifest itself. Whether or not I would work in real estate or something along those lines. Anything where I, pretty much got to eat what I kill is what I knew would be my calling in the long run. But after college, I moved out to Wyoming, to Jackson Hole, because I've always been an avid skier, and I really wanted an opportunity to ski in the backcountry more often, and Jackson really was the best place to do that. I also had the opportunity to work in guerrilla marketing and field marketing for a company called Motive Pure, which was started by a friend of mine's older brother back east in Baltimore and DC. Essentially, it's a electrolyte solution, so it's like Gatorade without the sugar is the easiest way to put it. So I was kind of introducing the product to the snow sports world, and that was really fun. I just got to go around and give people product and talk about it, and really gave me a good understanding of how grassroots marketing works. I also did a lot of fishing, and it was just great. I mean, it was a great lifestyle. But it wasn't exactly sustainable. So then I had the opportunity to start working in finance in Denver, Colorado. Actually, because of a buddy of mine who I'm staying with right now. He was working at a firm and they had an opening, and he said I should apply. So I got out of Jackson, but stayed in the mountains. This time with a 9 to 5, so to speak, or maybe a 8 to 8. But I was working in finance, and it was great. It was my first experience working a real office job, and for well over a year. And I guess it was in the spring of 2014 that I was trying to book a guided fly fishing trip in outside of Denver. And I was having trouble. I mean, I knew that there were a ton of good options that I knew about, but I was having trouble in that I was kind of playing phone tag with the outfitters that I was trying to go fishing with. And, I really only had like 30 minutes during my lunch break to do any kind of call outside of work. So I was just thinking that there had to be a better way, a more efficient way to, communicate with these guys and reach them and see the breadth of offerings in one place. I was using OpenTable to make reservations, and I was using Uber to get around town. And I just really wanted to see a marketplace applied correctly to this industry. So I poked around. I saw there were some people who were starting to do it, but they really weren't that far, and they certainly weren't brand names yet, or household names. So I moved back east. I started coaching lacrosse. I got a job at a gallery, as an art handler, so just moving paintings around. And I just started working on branding and brand awareness and all of that, and just kind of the back end documents to kind of figure out our direction. And luckily, I hooked up with my partner Macgill in the fall. He was working for another startup in Boston, and I convinced him to stop working for somebody and join me and co-found GuideHire together. So, then we got working on this in November, and then both left our part-time obligations, and Macgill took a semester off of school starting in January, and that's when we started cranking on GuideHire full-time in terms of product development and, starting to make the connections that we needed to, go after some fundraising and, essentially just doing this 24/7. That started in January.
Yeah. So basically, you found a problem that existed and, instead of saying, all right, well, that kind of sucks, you just went and made the solution for it, which is pretty cool because you probably didn't expect to make a business at all. Like, it just kind of happened that way. And I've seen, some of the most successful businesses came from people who found a problem and said, all right, like, we're going to make the solution for this because it's clearly something that other people would take advantage of. Did you ever think about, could I ever run a business? Like, did you have any fears of going into this, I might actually have to run a company and have employees and put in the longer days, that's instead of the 9 to 5?
Yeah, I mean, well, I was pretty familiar with working long hours. That part didn't scare me, and I love to create things is really the angle that I came at it from, rather than the structural kind of corporate side. Like, I just, I love photography. As a kid, I loved to paint and draw, and it was like what I was constantly doodling, and I love building things with my hands. I love to create, so I really look at this as more of like, yes, obviously there's going to be some hesitation on can I manage people, but we have interns, which is a great way for me to learn how to manage people when eventually we're paying them and they can do it full time. But I guess I just looked at it as a learning process, and I knew that scenario was so far down the road and that I had so much learning to do. The only way to do it was just to dive in. That's really how I looked at it. And I didn't go to Stanford, and I didn't go to college to start a company. You know what I mean? That's never been my MO. It's not what I studied. It's what I've read about in my free time, only because I wanted to solve this problem. And I think that's good. I mean, there's a level of authenticity here. We're solving a problem that we have ourselves. We're not in this because, the tech market is hot right now. We're in this because it's a problem that needs to be solved, and we're taking a proven, business model essentially and applying it to an underserved market. I mean, I always thought that's where the biggest opportunity lies in business. It's not true disruption, but it's applying kind of proven methods to underserved markets, whether those be international markets, like different physical geographical markets, or industries that are underserved and relatively antiquated.
Yeah. And so I'm curious to hear from you, how did you go about making a business? Because there's a lot of people that are listening in right now, and I know that there's people that check out our podcast that are interested in starting a business, but really don't even know where you get started. So having it, and what was your major, by the way?
My major was business administration, with a real estate finance concentration.
Gotcha. So you had a little bit of background in running a business, at least from college, but obviously that doesn't 100% prepare you for what the real world's going to throw at you once you do start a business. So where do you get started once you have this idea of here's the problem we want to solve? How do you take that from an idea to something real other than just making a website?
Well, it's just the biggest thing I would say is put everything on paper. Put all of your ideas on paper, and for me personally, that means scribbling it down in a notebook by hand, or up on a whiteboard, which I can do now, and then transferring that with some degree of organization to different documents. So you want an executive summary, you want a deck, you want any question that you think needs to be answered, or any question that you have yourself about your own business, you need to have answers for that written down. That's really the first place to start. And then just use the internet. I mean, there's so many good resources. Just ask Google some questions. What do I need? What's my next step? And use your personal network. I mean, I was lucky to have friends who had started companies, friends that worked for early stage startups, friends that worked in venture capital, and I just kind of asked them what they thought I needed. And from day one, everybody's like, "Oh, this is an uphill battle." But everybody's been supportive, and even as much as a pipe dream as it seemed like a year ago, nobody wrote me off. So it's really been helpful just to utilize my personal network. That's probably been the biggest advantage. And luckily, Macgill, he's worked for other startups. He had been in Boston, at Tufts for 5 years prior to when I moved back, and I had gone to high school around Boston. So, but he had that Boston startup network, so to speak. So, I wish I could say we had mentors that were really specific mentors that were really influential, but we never managed to zero in on the right person. So we've really just had to do this kind of piecemeal, get one suggestion from somebody, another suggestion from somebody else, and sit down and decide what works best for us.
Yeah, and I really like that you brought up Google, because I think far too many people forget about it. I'm like, Google has almost all the answers except for, Google can't really tell you your purpose in life. But I know that, if yeah, not yet. But if you know what you're passionate about, and clearly for you, a lot of it is being, outside, and whether it's skiing or hiking or fishing, you clearly know that you enjoy all that stuff. I think once you have that, it's very simple to just go to Google and say, how do I start a business? Because people come to me and they're like, I don't know how you did it. And I'm like, well, I sat down and I was like, I'm making a video company, and this is what I know. I know that at some point I've got to figure out the financial stuff. At some point I've got to figure out the legal stuff. And at some point I've got to figure out getting the clients. It's pretty simple as that. And so when I started to search, how do I start a business, things start to come up do you want to be an LLC or an S Corp? How are you going to register your business? And fortunately, there's very easy companies like LegalZoom who, make it ridiculously easy for you to get a business. And I even made this mistake up front was I paid a lawyer $900. And after I paid him, he was like, you could have just walked into the small business office and for $150 done the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, thanks for telling me that, after I spent the $900 with you. But, it's way easier than people think. And it just takes a little bit of, being smart in where you're researching and asking the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more and more, the further you get helping yourself, the more respect you'll get from people who want to come help you. So, I used LegalZoom initially, to become an LLC, just because I felt, that it was necessary, obviously for taxation. And then when we became a partnership, we did that all on our own. And then, more recently, we're now represented by WilmerHale, which is one of the largest, most well-respected corporate law firms in the country, and they've helped us turn into an S corp. But yeah, it's just kind of, you have to do what you can, do whatever it is that you can do immediately to push your company along, even if it's just a little bit. Just do it, because the further and further you get, the more respect you'll receive, and the more and more people will be coming out of the woodwork trying to help you.
Yeah. And so I have to ask this, because So I'll be 26 in a few weeks. My parents still have no idea what I do or how I can afford rent or anything like that. They know that I do something with cameras, right? So like they still think I'm a wedding videographer and I don't shoot weddings. So like what do you know how do you explain this to your parents and family that like you're gonna take a risk and try to start a business, and how's that received by them?
Everybody's been really, really supportive. I mean, I definitely think that initially, yeah, like my mom probably didn't understand exactly um, what I meant when I said I was starting like the open table for outdoor experiences. But she was very supportive. I was living in Denver at the time, and she let me come move back in with her until I could afford to move into Boston. So, they've been, I couldn't say better things about them. My family's been very supportive, and so is McGill's. I think that they kind of realize that we're young enough that if we're going to roll the dice and try and make something like this work, that there's no better time to do it, It's only going to get harder. The older you get, the harder it is to start a company. You have more on the line every day.
I love this episode so far, and I want to take a brief moment to talk about improving yourself each day. I know you are a huge fan of living life on your own terms, but if there's one thing I've learned in my journey, we need to constantly grow and look to others who have been in our shoes, which is why I've partnered up with Audible to give you one free download of your choice from over 180,000 books. Start your free 30-day trial by visiting yearofpurpose.com/audible. Now back to the show. Yeah, and I think that also goes to say that if you are older, if you do have a family or kids or anything like that, the truth is, yesterday was the time to start whatever it is you're trying to start, because it's not going to get any easier by saying, oh, like the kids have soccer practice and I have all this stuff over the next month. Like,
Right.
the truth is you're going to be just as busy next month. So if you really want to do it, like it's really just got to happen now. So how long ago did you guys launch GuideHire? Like when did that go live and you started to tell people about it?
So we launched our beta product in late April. And we've just been iterating on it ever since. It's not a closed beta at all, so anybody can go sign up www.guidehire.co and test the product and book trips, search for guides. It all works. There are people on the other end receiving your requests, so don't mess around too much, but figure out how it works and go book a trip. But really what we've been doing, our biggest thing has been collecting feedback from the guides themselves, because they are, so when I say guides, I mean, fishing guides, hunting guides, outfitters, so people who do, like kayak tours, backcountry ski operations, just any kind of outdoor guide or instructor. And I'm just going to refer to them as guides because it makes it easier. But going to these guides and finding out exactly, okay, so somebody booked a trip last week. Was it as seamless as it could have been? Like, essentially figuring out the UI and the UX on the guide side, and then and cleaning that up, and then on top of that, figuring out what tools they want to see and what would make this product even more useful. So things that we've just implemented is there's a back-end messaging system for guides. So that's kind of like moving in the direction of Uber's client rating. So, when you get in an Uber, you have a 1 to 5 star rating the same way that the driver does. We really want to help the guiding community get an idea for who they'll be spending the afternoon with or the morning with, you know what I mean? Because these activities, yes, they're transactions, but it's not like a point of sale. Okay, now you have the product. You're paying to spend X amount of time with somebody. So it's inherently very personal. So we're helping the guides communicate with each other on that level. We've also given them a dashboard so they can kind of manage their entire business from the back end. Their scheduling, if they want to use it. We're not trying to cut in, if somebody's still using their black book, or if they prefer Google Calendars, like there's absolutely no obligation to use ours. But we've kind of built it out to be as simple as possible, but it can be if a guide really wanted to use our platform as their back office, they could,
Nice.
which is awesome. But we have people using it on, every level of the spectrum. And yeah, we're just continually iterating on it and making it a better product for the guides, for our vendors.
That's awesome. So how are you guys going about finding these guides, and where does it start to make money for you guys when it's all said and done?
So we started out with 17 guides on that launch day in late April, and now we're up to 100. It's been an interesting mix of outbound and inbound. Um, when we first got going, it was a lot of me just hitting the phones, sending emails, and that was great. My background is business development, and I can speak these guys' language, so it's kind of, that's a great position for me, is reaching out to these people and creating relationships with them. But then, so kind of we grew a little bit there, right? And then all of those guides who we signed up, and they happened, most of them, to be in the fishing vertical, they started suggesting that their friends sign up, so you kind of see it start to spider web.
Nice.
And then, we ended up in Outside Online, which is Outside Magazine's website, and we had an article about us that was one of the most shared pieces on their site. I think it was, for 2 weeks, the most shared article on their site. And that was awesome because it was directly hitting this guy demographic that we're focusing on right now.
Right.
So that brought us a lot of inbound. So it's a really healthy mix of outbound and inbounds, and we have some strategies laid out for when we finally have some money in the bank to start spending money on marketing. And once we can kind of get through the weeds here, I'll get back to community outreach and doing all that stuff, which is really what I enjoy the most.
So it sounds like you really have a good laid out plan for how you're going to grow this, and I know that growth hacking is something that you're a pretty big fan of. Maybe do you have any tips for people on how they can get something like this off the ground very quickly? Because it looks like if you really had an idea already, that somebody could probably, at least get something preliminary up in like a week's time, at least just to start and have some sort of a, presence online.
I mean, in terms of growth hacking, I would say, use the devices that you have at hand, like I was saying earlier about just starting the company and doing what you can when you can. So if the product that you're building is super relevant to your personal network, get all of your, just bug your friends, make sure that they're on there. If it is, if it's relevant if it's going to be a product that services enterprise size companies, then go find a company where somebody who has a HR role or something, and ask if you can test the product out with them. I don't know. In terms of getting something up within a week, though, I would say when I first started this, I was a little bit hesitant to divulge too much before, and we definitely still hold some cards up our sleeves, but we don't have the kimono fully open to the world. But that being said, nothing's going to happen unless you're not, totally forthright with the right people about what you want to do. So your idea is probably not worth anything. Not to crush your dreams, but your idea is relatively worthless. It's all about execution. So don't be afraid to tell people what you intend to do and how you intend to do it, because if you do, they might help you get there. And if you don't, then you're just going to be caught daydreaming, thinking about, how you're going to get it done. And analysis is paralysis. So just kind of go out there and do it and tell everybody what you're going to do, because an idea is really worth nothing. It's all about the execution.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in that same boat. I set out to start writing a book recently, and at first I wasn't really telling anyone, and then I was like, you know what, I want everyone to hold me accountable for this because I want to make sure that this happens. So I
Right.
was like posting to Facebook. I've started to mention it in the podcast, and it's actually pushed me further along than I even thought because like I'm in a program that tells you what to do and when, and like I'm only supposed to be writing chapter 1 right now. I've already got like the outlines done for like the first 8 or 9 chapters. So it's one of those things where it's like when everyone else knows that this is what you're working on, they're going to start asking more about it. They're going to start trying to figure out how far along you are and where they can help you. um,
Exactly.
and,
Exactly.
and you'd
That's
be
a great.
surprised, like people want to help.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a perfect example. Make yourself accountable to your friends. Tell them what you're doing. Don't. Yeah. Don't hide your efforts. Let them know how hard you're working, and they might chime in with an idea or a way that they can help or an introduction. I mean, that's really the only way that you're going to get introduced to the right people is if you make your intent, known to your entire personal network.
Yeah. And so the cool thing about this is that, you guys are kind of in the middle of it. We've had people on the podcast where it's like, they've told their story and now here they are 10 or 20 years later and they've got a multi-million-dollar business. And I think it's really cool that we get to contrast it by seeing, you guys are in the trenches. You guys are the ones who are running into a lot of these problems and things that people talked about. Like now, this is happening right now. And so it's great to hear that, you're pushing through and some advice from you as far as, if somebody else wanted to do what you're doing. So I'm curious, do you have any like final words of wisdom just being in it right now and hitting obstacles, whether it's, building the business or finding more people to grow it with? Any like lasting words of wisdom just from what you've learned over the last year?
I would just say, and it's pretty simple, just be open to suggestions, be open to introductions, always be nice to people, because you never know, as in life and then also in the context of your business, because you never know when or how they'll be able to help you. And just be enthusiastic, even if you're, because there are troughs, and there are peaks, but and you're going to go through them, but just try and keep that outward facing demeanor at an even keel, and stay enthusiastic, and you know the longer that you are able to stay enthusiastic, the more the groundswell around your company will start to pick up. And it's hard for me to say never give up because we haven't gotten to the point yet where we're in a position to not entertain that. But we've managed to not give up for over a year. Or I've managed to give up for not o- for over a year now, and I think you just got to stay persistent, because if you really believe in your goal, then that's what gives you the best fighting chance. So after hearing myself say that diatribe, I would just say, don't get into something because there's a market opportunity, but get into it because you're passionate about it. Get into an industry that you can see yourself working in for the rest of your life, and then fight tooth and nail to create the job that you want within that industry.
Awesome. Well, I think that's the best way to round out this episode. James, what's the best way for people to check out, info about you, and if they want to check out GuideHire, like what's the website, and do you have a Facebook link or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. So the website is www.guidehire. That's GuideHire.co. So .co. We're facebook.com/GuideHire. We have a great Instagram and Twitter presence. The cool thing about this industry is that the media that comes out of it is all amazing. It's really cool to look at. It's really fun to share. So that's at guide_hire. And then, yeah, just Google us. I mean, you can read a little bit about us. We've got some PR. If you want to email me directly, my email is james@guidehire.co. And I'd love to hear from you, regardless of what your interest in what we're doing is. It's just always great to hear from people who want to get in touch. So don't hesitate.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for being here, and we'll definitely keep in touch. And for everyone listening in, check out GuideHire.co. And James, we'll talk to you next time.
Cool. Thanks, Evan.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Year of Purpose podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave us a rating and review if you loved this episode. Now, are you ready to live life on your own terms? Head on over to www.yearofpurpose.com right now for the tools, resources, and the roadmap to living a life re-scripted. And tune in next week for another episode of the Year of Purpose.